Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, folks, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this Monday. It's already December 3rd, 2018. Can you believe it? Greg Anthony here on the Investigative Journal. Been away for a while, doing a little bit of work to keep the boat afloat, so to speak. But good to be back, and I'll try to get in as many shows as I can before the holidays. Of course, I take off a lot of time during the holidays. And then you can bet I will be back in force on January 3rd, 2019, God willing, and the creek don't rise. Okay, good to see you people, or hear you people, or talk to you people. It's been a while. And what I wanted to mention, what happened in the last weekend was quite interesting. I've got a couple things I want to talk about today. One, the migrant so-called invasion. I call it a orchestrated effort to turn America into South Africa. And then let's talk about the passing of George H.W. Bush, better known as 41. And all I'm going to do is say this right now. You can't kick a good man down, right? Well, that's what they're saying, that George Bush is a good man. Well, you can't kick anybody down after he dies, right? Got to give a guy a break. What is the time you have to wait before you can criticize somebody after they die? I don't know. Is 2 weeks okay? Is a month okay? Is 3 weeks okay? Do you have to wait 6 months? Who knows? But we know if you turn on every TV station that he is being applauded as an American hero, a kind and generous man, etc., etc. Although there are people that say it's quite different. I'll have a lot to say, and I have said a lot about George H. Bush, W. Bush, in the past. George H. Bush, yeah, W is the little guy, who's painting now. That's what he does at his ranch. He paints. After being president, he should have been a painter, not a president. But then again, he was born to an aristocratic family. Almost all of our presidents come from elitist European families. In fact, what is it? 1/2 or 2/3 are from the bloodline of Charlemagne. I'm going to do some research on Charlemagne, because I've always considered, when I say Charlemagne, I say champagne. And I start thinking of drinking champagne. Well, anyway, it's the Christmas season. I put up a Christmas tree this year that's blinking in front of me, and many people are going to go, he's pagan. He's a pagan guy. No. I just decided that I'd like to have a little bit of happiness in my life and pretend that all that pagan stuff doesn't exist for a while. At least for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, right? Okay. And anyway, it's a fake tree. I don't put real trees up. Too much work. All those little needles falling all over the place. But I digress. Okay, so we have a little bit of a commentary on George Bush. The only thing I want to say about him is that please look at some of the real behind-the-scenes things this guy was involved in. And then I don't know how people will say, God, he's a hero. He's the kindest man in the world. Well, anyway, you can't kick a man down after he's down. So we'll wait. Like I said, somebody email me and tell me what's the proper time. 1 week, 1 day, 24 hours, 6 months, who knows? So anyway, George H.W. Bush passed on at the ripe old age of in his mid-90s. Okay, let's look at something interesting here. And I decided to do this just as an experiment. We all know about the Sandy Hook shooting, okay? And if you go to the internet, you'll find that there are hundreds of articles about it being a false flag, etc., etc. But do you know the shooting? What was the shooting right after Sandy Hook? And was it a false flag? Do you remember? Well, it occurred at Taft High School. And that was in Taft, California, not far from the border where I live, in Chula Vista. Well, I don't really live in Chula Vista, because I'm not going to tell you where I live. But anyway, I used to live in Chula Vista. But Taft, I've been to Taft. I've been to that area, and I know where it's at. It's a very flat area, okay? Taft High School. That was the shooting after Sandy Hook. And there was, as it's reported, let me show you how they reported it. A student shot and wounded a 16-year-old at rural California high school on Thursday, then fired at another student but missed. The shooter walked into to Taft Union High School Thursday morning and opened fire with a shotgun, said Kern County Sheriff Donnie Youngblood. The wounded student is in critical but stable condition, Youngblood said. A teacher suffered a minor pellet wound to the head. Okay, so we got the teacher who suffered a minor pellet wound to the head, the guy had a shotgun, and there was one 16-year-old that was shot. So, was this a false flag? All right, how are you going to find out? Well, I had an idea. Why not? You realize that a case like this is going to be legally contested. So, not criminally, but civilly. So Taft is going to get sued by who? The person shot, right? Who was the person shot? It doesn't say in this article because it appeared right after. But then if they're going to do a legal thing, they're going to go through what? Filing a complaint, then an answer, and then they get into the discovery stage, and then they come to depositions. So I uncovered a deposition of the guy who was shot. Yes. They reported him being shot as 17 years old, okay, when he entered the hospital. I know his name, and it's, you can look on the public, it's in a court case now, Taft Union High School, and his name is Bo Cleveland. They reported him at the hospital as 17 years old. He had multiple pellet gunshot wounds to the abdomen, okay. He survived the operations, and there was the deposition. All of it right there, the whole thing. And I read there were many, many depositions in this case. I read one by one of his attending physicians. And so apparently, he went to Cedars-Sinai Hospital. Apparently he was shot. So, occasionally I think with people like that are saying Sandy Hook and all these things are false flags, there are ways to find out. Now, I'm not saying Sandy Hook was a false flag, or was not, although there are many indications that it was. I think there's ways to find it out because anybody shot at these school shootings is going to file a civil lawsuit against the school district, the insurance company, etc. I even know the insurance company here, and usually it's going to be the insurance company who insures these schools for catastrophic accidents, and they pay a premium. And guess who is basically covered? These students at Taft High School from grade 9 through 12. Okay, there's a way to prove if this case actually was a false flag. So I'm saying, by reading the deposition and the hospital reports, this kid was actually shot. The only discrepancy I can see is that it's reported in the newspaper he was 16 and he was actually 17, which is not uncommon. I remember as a newspaper reporter, hey, how old is that guy? He's 16. All right, 16-year-old Bo Cleveland when he's actually 17. So I can understand that mistake. But there you go. This was not, in my estimation, a false flag based on checking up on the depositions of this man, okay, or this kid. There you go, Bo Cleveland. And you can find that, it's court records. I mean, there's no say, he's a minor, but he's in the court records, he's in the depositions, and the case is Cleveland versus Taft Union High School. Okay, So there you go. There's a way to prove that there are false flags or not, because, think about it. On all these people that are shot at Sandy Hook would be a good example. Got to get into the court filings of all these kids that were shot, see how many filings were for civil lawsuits, because this kid was only hit with a buckshot from a shotgun in the stomach. I could get into every technicality of his treatment, and he did survive, and he spent at least, 4 or 5 days in the hospital. So with Sandy Hook, they would be the same thing, right? If you got a kid that was shot, killed too, you got a wrongful death case on all killings, there should be records. Now, with the wrongful death cases, that would be a little more difficult, because, then you got to rely on the coroner's body reports, which can be fudged. But there had to be injuries. So you look at the injuries first, and then you go to that. So that's my advice to anybody out there wondering about these school shootings and false flags. Okay, let's move on to a couple subjects of interest. Aren't you a bit tired of the stories about the migrants in Tijuana? Okay, it's interesting that they started in Honduras. Of course, they were bought and paid for, promised many different things. And this migrant caravan ends up being, given buses. And we know for a fact that there's one San Diego lawyer, and I found this out from somebody that lives in Playas de Tijuana, which is the coast of Tijuana, where a lawyer on Airbnb, a San Diego lawyer, paid for an Airbnb house and put 80 of these migrants into a house, and apparently the people in the neighborhood complained a little bit. Got a 3-bedroom house with 80 people in it, paid for by a San Diego lawyer. So, guess what? Somebody is orchestrating this to create what? To create exactly what they did in Europe when, over a couple of years ago, Angela Merkel allowed 1 million migrants in there, and now people in Europe, in Germany, are just pulling their hair out. So now what's happened? They pay for all these people to get to the border. It's not uncommon, but not in these numbers. During the Obama administration, there were many times that people rushed the border and they used tear gas, etc., to pull them back. And nobody said a word during Obama's administration. You didn't even hear about it. But now that these numbers are here and Trump is president, boy, it's like the biggest crime in the world. You can't do that. You can't do that. But anyway, they've created this chaos on purpose. And you got now 7,000 to 8,000 of these migrants, many children. They estimate maybe 500. And who knows? Living in squalor. They live in a sports complex in Tijuana that can't fit that many people. Then it rained really heavy, and they had to move them out, and they're in another place now. But the problem is that all it is a show of force. When is the last time you saw people coming with their flag, waving their flag, saying, "I want asylum"? Asylum, folks, is not for looking for a job. I mean, should I take the American flag because I can't find a job? I live in Flint, Michigan. I can't find a job, and I take my American flag and I hop on a freighter and I go to the border of Sweden and I start yelling, "Let me in! Asylum! I'm being persecuted." And they say, "Well, what's the persecution, Greg?" "I can't find a job in America." You know what they're going to do? Next thing you know, I'm going to be in one of their insane asylums. So it's the same situation here. Asylum is not meant for this type of thing, and everybody knows it. But what we're creating here is this situation where, in the end, what they really want to do is erase all the borders in North America here and create what they want, the North America Union. And in the meantime, to do that, they have to get rid of middle-class America and flood it. Look, there's a lot of people in Tijuana who make more money than people in Chula Vista. So, I mean, there's a middle class in Tijuana as well. And in a sense, there's more people here, and I take some pride in understanding it because I go across the border a lot, that live pretty good on a little less money and aren't feeling that kind of American crunch of the middle class, even though they don't have as much. So if you can follow me, you bring 7,000 or 8,000 people to Tijuana, and all of a sudden, it's tough because, they don't make as much money here. Now, I know that some people that came from Honduras have already taken jobs in Tijuana, and then some are going back. I think at least 300 are going back because they've realized they're up against a brick wall because they're not going to get in. So let's see what happens. But to me, this migrant situation shows me that the Democrats and the Republicans all work together because they really don't want to solve this problem. They want to agonize on it and, in the end, create their synthesis of the New World Order, which I've talked about many, many times. The New World Order is nothing but the elites, along with the Vatican. The Vatican gets hundreds of millions of dollars a year on Central American migration and things like that, taking care of whatever. They get hundreds of millions of dollars in Europe. And what do you think the Pope is saying? Let him in, let him in. And Trump is saying, no, we're not going to let him in. So you got the perfect Hegelian dialectic of, yes, let him in, don't let him in. And in the meantime, Americans are taking sides. You're going to talk to one American who says, I'm going to the border and going to get all these people in, And then you get the other American who says, I'm going to stay at the border with a shotgun, and anybody who steps foot across it's getting their head blown off. So that's what we have going with the migrant situation. There's an interesting story put on Fox News that I just watched a little while ago. It's about, I don't know if anybody was around that's listening to my show in 1969, when the last surviving Kennedy was involved in a scandal called Chappaquiddick, when he was at a party on Martha's Vineyard or in Chappaquiddick, which is in that part of the world, and he was driving down a lonesome road, very tight road around water, and his car went in the ditch. Mary Jo Kopechne, who was a staff worker for Robert Kennedy, his brother, died in the car accident. Kennedy didn't report it. Teddy, this lone survivor, didn't report it until the next morning. And then it started that whole scandal. Kennedy never was charged with leaving the scene of a crime, drunk driving, anything like that. You don't know what happened. All we know is that Kopechne died. And there's so many particulars on it. But it just was another story that showed me that these elites can, no matter if they're Democrat or Republican, can get away with anything. Murder, in this case, maybe. Or manslaughter. Or reckless driving. Anything. And so now that you look, fast forward to 2018, pretty soon 19, you have this phenomenon of the special counsel in Washington, and everybody in America's heard it. I mean, that's all you hear, is trying to bring Trump down because of collusion with Russia. Now, if you watch this stuff, you'll see that there's no evidence at all. And they've been spending millions and millions of dollars for years, for a year and a half now. And at the same time, they neglect obvious crimes of Hillary Clinton and her gang. And they won't do anything about it. So my question is, if a Republican has the House, if the Republicans have the Senate, and they have the White House, that means they own the Justice Department, how come Trump is being looked at when Hillary Clinton isn't? Shouldn't it be the other way around? No. because it's a game they're playing with you. These people work together. Trump, this is a show. He's never going to get charged with anything. And they're allowing the obvious crimes to go unchallenged. And then you see the games they're playing within. This is the biggest mockery, not of the swamp people, they call them. It's of a mockery of the American people not getting it. They know 90% of America, I don't care if you're a doctor working in a brain specialist or you're the top lawyer of some financial firm, they know you're stupid about this subject. And they know that they got you by the cojones. Whether you're making too much money or not any money, you got interest not to know or to study what really they're doing. And so maybe, a small majority of people can figure it out, and they could give a shit about that because they know that they have the rest of America buffaloed. All right, education. What a sorry state the universities in this country have become. I mean, the tuitions go up. You have no freedom of speech. You have people at these the students at these universities worrying more about gender righteousness or gender equality, as they say, to where they spend their time thinking about how you can't say Frosty the Snowman or Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was bullied and that shouldn't be around, and we go on and on with this nonsense. And that's what they're doing to the American minds. Who in their right mind, they just banned, there's a radio station that just banned a song that is kind of Christmassy, but it's always played around Christmas. Ricardo Montalban, if you remember him, the Latin lover, was singing a song called "Baby, It's Cold Outside," and da-da-da-da-da-da. And so they got some complaints that it's racist, it's sexist, because he was saying, baby, they were at a house and it was cold and snowy outside, and he was saying, don't leave the house, stay with me. And he was basically courting this younger woman. I mean, it wasn't like he was 90 and she was 20, or he was a sexual predator. He was just saying, come on, you know how you want to have fun in life? You can't have fun in life anymore. So, all the education system is doing now is ruining American minds, not creating them. And that's their object. I mean, I could go over example after example. But listen, if you go to college, there's no reason to think that a majority of American students who come out of college are smarter than anybody that never went to college. In fact, the people that never went to college these days are probably smarter. Now, the point is, you could take the top students at any of these universities, whether it's a liberal Berkeley or whether it's a, conventional elitist Harvard or Yale. And I'm talking about the average or the top. And you start talking the way we do on this show, and they're either lost or they'll never get it. Because they know that if they get it, they're never going to make a lot of money. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app. for all of your mobile devices. Streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn, the Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This ain't happening.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour of the Investigative Journal. That was a good start, wasn't it? I haven't been back on the air for a while, and that was a good 30-minute half hour. Hope you can catch some of my old shows at FirstAmendmentRadio.com, as well as going to my website at greganthonysjournal.wordpress.com. Get shows going back well over 12 to 15 years, how time flies, regarding what I call the Vatican-led New World Order. All its minions, all its lies, all its deceits, all of its everything. Well, let me tell you, my voice isn't holding up. I mean, I came back and I expect to talk for an hour. Oh, no, can't do it today. So anyway, what I thought I'd do, I was thinking about this at the break. I said, man, I'm looking out and I see a flat earth. I'm looking out, I don't believe in the moon landing. When I die, will I really see it? And then I can come back in some kind of ghostly form and tell everybody? And who was the guy that made me really understand that we never went to the moon? Which then made me think about, well, if we didn't go to the moon, maybe we lied about the whole story of the universe. And that guy's Bart Sibrel. And Bart is and let me read something about him, is a documentary filmmaker I interviewed years ago, well over a decade. And when it comes to the hoax of NASA moon missions, his 2 films, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon and Astronauts Gone Wild, you got to watch them, they're great. You can get them on the internet now. Reveal all the essential information that really anybody needs to know to understand that our government lied to us. Oh, really? And in the process, murdered more than one person to keep the story quiet. Today we get the privilege. Yes, I'm going to find it. I was looking for my interview. I did many with Bart. I couldn't find any, so I found a guy named Deep Thoughts. I saw his little website. And he interviewed Bart Sibrel. And he only had 4,000 listeners. I mean, people that have viewed this. And I don't know exactly when he interviewed him. But I looked at Bart, and he looked like he aged. They got a picture of him. So I wanted to play it for you. And we're going to get the privilege to listen to him again. And at least for 20 minutes. This is about a 46-minute interview. And it's interesting because, think about it. I was listening to Fox News the other day, and they had a guy named Jerome Corsi on, who's now in the public light because the special prosecutor was trying to tell the world that Trump had collusion with Russia. It's all a hoax. Both sides. And Corsi is facing time in prison now because of something. He talked to Julian Assange, he didn't, and, it's crazy. And he was being interviewed by Hannity, and Hannity said, but you're the person that also thought that 9/11 was an inside job and we didn't go to the moon. He said, oh, no, nobody, that was taken out of, that was exaggerated, it's not true. So please, look at Jerome Corsi. He's on InfoWars with Alex Jones. And try to find out how many times he said that. I know he said it a lot, that 9/11 was an inside job. But you get him on Hannity, he had to lie and say he didn't because the audience wouldn't accept him. So that's the kind of BS you get. But anyway, let's listen to Mr. Sibrel again. Tell us why a funny thing happened on the way to the moon. We didn't go.
You were in for a huge treat.
Here you go.
This is one of my own
I'm
personal
talking over this guy.
heroes. Probably one of the very first human beings that actually woke me up to conspiracy thinking in the first place, but took on one of the things that in 1991, 10 years before he released his film, two friends of mine from NASA told me we didn't go to the moon. I couldn't process the words coming out of their mouth. 10 years later, in fact, probably even 15 years later, when I first saw...
See, this guy, he experienced the same thing I did. So let's go back to it.
One of the most amazing movies called The Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon by Bart Sibrel. My mind opened, and that opened me to everything else, and I want to welcome onto the show Mr. Bart Sibrel. When I had a show before this one where I had my partner was about 7 years older than me, and he said that when the moon mission happened, he saw it live. And I don't know if anyone's asked you if you were old enough to see it live and remember it on TV.
Well, I was old enough in a way. I was 4.5, but I think it was Central Time around 9:30, 10:30, something like that. And that was past my bedtime. I couldn't stay up that late, I was asleep in bed. However, my father was in the Air Force as an officer, and he got a VIP package of 9x12 color prints of the first mission to the moon, and they were a cherished present. I had them up on my bedroom wall for 10 years. So from the age of 4 to 14, I saw them over 3,665 times, right? So that's a lot of imprinting. I thought it was the most marvelous thing. And then when I was 14, after seeing them for 10 years every day, I saw Bill Casey on Oprah, or no, it was actually a magazine program, although he did Oprah before then. And he said, they didn't go to the moon. And that kind of planted a seed in my brain, and I went to my bedroom wall, and sure enough, it was like my eyes were wide shut or something. And I saw them with new perspective, things that were right there in front of you. I mean, the most famous shot, the guy's arm is bent like this in the picture, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's supposed to have pressure in it. Why are there wrinkles? Have you ever seen any wrinkles in a balloon?
Right.
And so there's so much information. There's like 7 or 8 clues. His antenna's cut off. Where's his antenna? Because the background, it was up on cables or something. The cables, even though they were black, showed up. So they very quickly pasted black tape on top. And you'll see in certain prints, the background below the backpack is one black, and above the black backpack it's a different shade of black. Now they corrected that later, but in early prints it's a straight line across of a different shade of black, and there's no antenna. They cut off the antenna because they were covering something up, probably cables or something. Then the background wall and the soil in earlier pictures, not in later pictures. You have to find books from like 1975, something like that. And the soil is brown and the soil behind him is blue. I mean, they're two completely different colors. And so then they color corrected it and now it's all blue. I mean, there's so many clues right in that one picture. So then another 10 years go by, Mark, and I'm 24. Now I'm a filmmaker, and guess I'm editing one day a film with the guy who made the TV show, with the guy saying we didn't go to the moon. I'm like, who was that guy in your show? And he's like, oh, I don't remember. Call the San Francisco office. I did. They said, Mr. Sabrell, we were 2 days away from deleting all 10-year-old files to make room in our archives. We're going to throw everything away. Had you called 2 days later, we would have never been able to tell you who the guy was. So I got his name and contacted him from a payphone just in case this whole thing ended up being true. Just to be on the safe side. And within a couple of minutes, you could tell he was the real person, very grandfatherly or whatever. And he said, hey, you should make a film about it. And I basically took off 6 months. I paid myself a salary, whatever I was making back then. Pretty decent to live. And for 6 months, I just did research how the shadows that should be parallel from sunlight, they intersect. Two of the three astronauts never give interviews. The administrator of NASA resigned. The Soviets did everything first. The first man, the first woman, the first animal, everything. And the expressions on their faces, like they're at a funeral instead of winning the Super Bowl. I said, there's at least a 1 out of 4 chance they faked it. And considering if it were real, that's 1 out of 4 chance I could be risking my life looking into it. So I said, I want to have a wife and family someday. I decided didn't want to do it. I turned down the project. And then 5 years go by, another client said, hey, Bart, read the Bible and we'll give you an open door to get your script to this famous producer. So I bought a 1-year Bible. I read it, I think 5 times from cover to cover, 5 years by. I read the Bible now 5 times. Still didn't understand it. It's like reading a book, How to Play the Piano by Beethoven, but having no teacher. And you're playing with 2 fingers 5 years later. But anyway, I did have the understanding that there is right and wrong. There is a distinction. Obviously, rape is wrong and murder is wrong. Stealing is wrong. I mean, there's certain things that are obvious. And if that's the case, then there are forces at work, seen and unseen, go in one direction and go in the other direction. So you have to make a decision what is morally right. If they did not go to the moon, you see, Mark, that's more profound than if they'd actually gone. Imagine they could go to the moon, they could put something up there, or they couldn't do it. They embezzled billions of dollars and they murdered people to keep it a secret. That's more profound than if they'd actually gone. That's more profound of an event historically, and it ends up being true. So I changed my mind. We raised $500,000 from an aerospace board member at NASA. Building rockets for NASA is the guy who financed our film, and he wishes to remain anonymous. And I don't want to ruin his career or make his stock go down.
Do say thank you next time you talk to him.
Yes, all the time. But in any case, and then 3.5 years into a 5-year film, I thought, just like some Americans thought, we'll never see a black president in my lifetime, especially African Americans. They said that. They were wrong. Thank goodness we proved at least we're not racist. That happened historically. It was a great moment for the African American people. And but I said kind of the same thing. We'll never know in my lifetime whether they went wrong. I was just like they were. I put in a tape one day. It said, "Do not show to the public" on the screen, and I'm like, what? What's on the label and on the tape are 2 different things. They put the wrong label on it, and it got put in the public pile, but way down at the bottom, second from the end. And most reporters asked for the first few tapes. I said, send me everything. Every picture, every video, every film from just the first mission, because I figured if they faked it, they're more likely to have made a mistake the first time they faked it. So let's focus on that mission. If that's fake, then they're all fake, because if one Volkswagen can't go 1,000 miles an hour, none of them can. So if they couldn't go to the moon, that means none of them can. And then we analyze this tape, and it's them faking a shot of the photography with a model, making a 1-foot model of the Earth, pretending they're halfway to the moon, and you hear the CIA in a private channel telling them to only talk after 4 seconds go by to give this impression that they're further away from the Earth than they really were. And the shot is beautiful. They use a circular window, and the Earth fills a portion of it, and they put the camera back and they turn off the lights, and it looks like the Earth floating in space, and they say we're far away from the Earth, but it's really the window. And
Let me ask you, when I watched that in your movie, I heard the words coming through beautifully, and it took me like 4 or 5 watches to know what the heck I'm looking at. So how long did it take you to figure out what you were looking at?
About 4 or 5 watches.
And then, so you're the first person in the world to see this, really, and how...
Yeah, I'll tell you exactly what happened.
Okay,
here's what happened, okay? So, I'm trying to finish up the film. It's non-linear editing. We had non-linear editing back then, and which is part of how they faked the moon landing, but another story. And so I'm trying to finish up the film, and I'm looking for the launch in real time, 1 minute to 0 without edits. This is kind of dramatic, whether they went to the moon or not. They did go into Earth orbit, and that is no small feat even today. So they did it in 1969. It's a brilliant feat to get into Earth orbit back then, but that's all they did. And so we have them faking being halfway to the moon, which means they couldn't go halfway. They cannot leave Earth orbit. And what a surprise, 50 years later, the farthest we can go is Earth orbit. So to say they went 1,000 times farther with 50-year-old technology on the first attempt, and it can't be repeated by any nation on Earth 50 years later, that's a pretty unusual claim. In fact, it's the only time in world history a milestone was made, like crossing the Atlantic in an airplane, or Columbus, or the Wright brothers, or breaking the sound barrier. It's the only time in the entire history of technology that once a milestone was made, nobody, including the people who claim they did it, could not repeat it for more than 50 years. It's the only time that's happened.
And I'll tell you, the analogy I do is that if you take 236,000 miles as the average, or 37 or whatever, and you divide a wall from the floor to the ceiling, you get about a centimeter for every 1,000 miles. And if you think about the fact that in Apollo 9, we only got to about 200 miles up, we're talking about we only got 2 millimeters off the ground on all the missions before, and then the very next thing with Apollo 10, we go all the way to the ceiling, circle around, and come all the way back. And that's just the magnitude of...
Yeah, and the great thing is on this tape, they say, that as they're faking the shot, this is the way 10 did it. Well, what are they talking about? Apollo 10. Any time a mission claimed to orbit the Earth with people, it never happened. Which means Apollo 10 didn't happen. I think they did it on Apollo 8. I'll have to double check my memory. But I think they did it on 8 and 10. And then, of course, they did it on the 6 missions and the alleged 7th that allegedly orbited the moon. Apollo 13. And on April 13th, at 13:13 military time.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know.
I mean, come on. Someone's having fun with
Masonic much? Yeah.
Well, you know, people were complaining after they... I mean, imagine Mark, right now, we'd say we got to take a break. They're planting a flag for the very first time at the South Pole. Right now, let's take a break. We watch it, of course we watch it. But let's say a year from now, we're having another interview, and they're doing it a second time. Are we watching it the second time? Of course we're not. We're continuing the interview. And that's what happened when they went to the moon the second time. People were
That's a great analogy.
We have a lot of more missions coming here. We need some moolah off of this thing. I mean, a moon rover, $60 million. I mean, it has fewer parts than Jeep. And $60 million.
Do you have probably one of the most, in making this documentary, you have one of the most unique positions to have had the conversation with people coming from a level of authority. Do you find that people that actually saw it on TV have an extra level of just impossible resistance to get over that hump?
Yeah. What it is, Mark, it's kind of the opposite of the following. Let's say you're here in Chicago, and I say I want to take you to this great restaurant, and it's got the best steak and everything. So we get there, and the service is great, and you're about to, and the steak looks fabulous, smells good. Right before you cut in it, a cockroach crawls up across the plate. Okay. Runs out the table.
I've had that happen twice.
Yeah. And I say, this is my favorite restaurant. I've seen them before, and I've seen mice run across the plate. Still a great. So, 50 years from now, what do you remember about that restaurant? You remember the great service, aren't you? No, you remember how great the steak smelled. No, you remember the cute waitress. No, you remember the cockroach. And once that is burned in, you cannot unburn it. And once people cried, oh my God, they said, remember, out of the overflowing of the heart, the mouth speaks. When the rocket launched, my God. It has become their God, because I talked to a professor at a major university, a professor at one of the top universities in the country, and I asked him, he was adamant we went to the moon, how dare you say otherwise, people are not that wicked to fake it. Hello, children are being molested, genocide for your religion in the tens of millions, and someone wouldn't lie on a test? I mean, come on. And so he said, or I asked him, if you saw one of the Apollo astronauts tearfully confess on national TV, he lied, he's sorry, what would you think then? He said, I still think they went.
Oh my gosh.
I think he went crazy. So he says he knows better than the man who was there because he saw it on television.
Yeah.
That's pretty remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Congress passed a law after the quiz show scandal, right? Time magazine had on the cover the smartest man in America in the late 1950s. It's a major, they made a film about it called The Quiz Show Scandal.
I've seen that,
okay?
Yeah.
So he was the smartest man in America as long as he got the answers in advance, which is the key to his success. And when that came out, there were congressional hearings. Time magazine was wrong. Time magazine was deceived. Just like they put a man on the moon. They were deceived. And so Congress wrote a law, television cannot be an instrument to which to lie.
Oh my gosh.
And what did they do with Apollo 11? And then after World War II ended, to say we're not going to continue spying on everybody, they said propaganda is illegal. Now I know they recently reversed that like 6 months ago, but that wasn't reversed in 1969, was it? So not only did they use television to lie, they also were using it as propaganda, both of which are felonies. So the government committed 2 felonies.
Interesting.
The government is a felon.
Yeah.
The government is an uncaptured, at-large felon.
Interesting. Okay,
I'm sorry,
so...
Did I offend somebody? I'm so sorry.
Well, I'm gonna follow up with you.
But I'm hearing there are people at the door now. I've got to go.
Yeah, right. So, okay.
Hey, Mark, I have a question for you real quick.
Yeah.
How many CIA agents does it take to screw in a light bulb?
No idea.
Well, I can tell you, but...
Yeah, that's good. So just before your film came out, and I wasn't aware of your film coming out, but I think I saw it about 2006 or 7 because you were gracious enough to share it online. There was this weird video that I saw when I was working at Electronic Arts where an astronaut's coming down the stairs and a big light goes slamming in front of the screen. Have you ever seen this film?
Oh yeah, it's very funny. Some filmmaker made it in his garage.
Is that it?
Did it? Of course.
Okay.
It's a fake film that some filmmaker made in his garage.
Okay.
It's like a guy at my level, filmmaker, and financially up one step, and his principal like that. They have plenty of money and they have studios, and they would do that for fun as a joke, whether we went to the moon or not. They don't care. They don't have anything to do with about it. It's a joke to them. It's very funny. I thought it would look beautiful. But, but people take it as the real thing, whatever. They still didn't go to the moon. I mean, that's why there's the whole flat earth thing. When Bill Casey was on Oprah, as soon as Bill Casey was he worked at NASA for 6 years building the Apollo rocket. He edited memos, so he saw the whole thing that they tried to departmentalize to keep it a secret. He saw everything. He had top secret clearance. He saw memos that said the odds of them going and coming back alive are 1 in 10,000. I mean, the 747 was built 10 years after going to a moon, and millions of aircraft had already been built. And it took 3 years longer to develop than the moon rocket with 10 years newer technology. And it took 160 attempts to get the fuselage off the ground before the engines worked. And the Wright brothers, 20 attempts before they got off the ground. And yet the most complicated one, done with 1/millionth of the computing power of a cell phone, they did it on the first occasion. That's never been done in the entire history of aviation, except the most difficult thing ever done.
Yeah. Well, the weird thing about that footage where that light came down was that you go and look it up. I remember doing this in like 2000, and they said that the director had already died.
Well, the whole thing about this is, if they come up with evidence, and the evidence proves to be false, then that must mean we went to the moon. That's their whole point about this disinformation. The shoes on the boot don't match. They do match. They had plastic, coveralls that went over the flat thing. The point is, that's rubber. Now, if I take a piece of rubber, just like I have a pair of shoes just like that have spikes in them for the snow, and they're made out of that exact same type of rubber. If I put it in the oven at 250 degrees, I don't think it would be covered by the warranty. I think I would have a pile.
Yeah.
I think I would have a pile of silly-putty with a bunch of spikes coming out of it all over the spot. You know what I mean? So how could the rubber, why don't you look into that, how could the rubber not melt at 250 degrees? It's just silicone rubber or something.
I know. Well, the whole thing about the space...
Okay, I have to cut it off right there because we only have a minute to go. And I think if you go to A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, you'll enjoy it. If you still believe we went there when there... If you do, please watch this movie, video he did. And when I was listening, it brought back some memories of interviewing Bart years ago. I think it was 2005 or 6. And he woke me up to a lot of things because I didn't think we went, but he had some evidence that really made it conclusive in my mind that we couldn't go. And thanks to him for that information. And isn't it great when you get information from others that piece together the puzzle of life for you? That's what we try to do here. Our puzzle that we do, our piece of life here, is putting that Vatican piece of puzzle, the piece of the puzzle, into your life so that your puzzle is complete before you pass on. See you tomorrow on The Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.